Good morning, everybody. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to start with agenda approval. Is there any additions or corrections to the agenda, commissioners? Is Jeff or Neil on? Are you on?
You got a fidgeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Should we read those off?
Names on there?
Yeah. Can you read off who's on there?
Austin Hoffman and Mark Hoffman.
We have Mark Hoffman, Austin Hoffman. and Nick. Jeff,
Jeff, you're on.
you're on? Okay.
Yeah, I'm on.
All right, we just did the pledge of allegiance, Jeff. And then when we proceed, when we do a procedure, if we do make a motion and vote, we'll do a roll call vote, Jeff. Okay?
Okay,
All right.
all right.
Sid, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Give us a little explanation of why we're here today.
Yeah, so when Austin recused himself, we kind of took a little bit of time to decide and who we were gonna go with. Absolutely thought Brian Jordy would be the, number one go-to guy. And, he had suggested Nick Moser to begin with, and then sent us an email shortly thereafter, saying he would, have, Nick Zwak. What's that? Ryan Zwak represent us, so we actually had another meeting for that, to sign a contract and to, put Nick Ryan Zwak on retainer. Austin from the beginning has been saying that it could be a possible conflict of interest because I am part of the landowner group, that Brian Jordy is representing. I had talked to both Ryan and Brian about this, and they felt it was not because the landowner group and the county were both aiming for the same result, basically that the PUC and Summit would follow the county's ordinance that was written. But basically what happened here last week was that when we hired Ryan, Austin just was adamant that we were, gonna get into trouble with a conflict of interest. So, of course, we let Brian and Ryan know, and they just thought literally said to save the drama, it's not worth it. If you would just put Nick on retainer, that would solve the problem. So that's kind of where we're at. I believe Nick is on Zoom with us. Nick, can you add anything to that, or I'm sure you kind of know the series of events that went on.
Yep, good morning, everybody. Happy to be with you. I don't really have anything to add. I think you summed it up just fine as far as, my understanding. My opinion, Brian Jordy, Ryan Schwach, Austin Hoffman, all three really good attorneys. Both Brian and Austin had, suggested that I step in and help out here, and I'm happy to do so if that's what the commission deems appropriate.
And Nick, fill us in a little bit. Even though House Bill 1052 passed, it's still possible that some Carbon Solutions could want to get a permit because their Iowa permit and I think their North Dakota permit also are contingent on South Dakota South Dakota PUC giving Summit Carbon Solutions a permit. Am I correct on that, or? is that a reach?
Well, I think you're correct, at least for sure from the standpoint of, you know, Summit obviously has a standing application, right? Now, would we have some kind of authority to maybe dismiss that based on the statute that was just passed? Possibly. I think that's probably a conversation for a little further down the road. As far as the discovery goes, I don't know, did you guys get one of the love letters that said you've got 15 days to respond to discovery? Did you guys receive something like that?
The questions, you mean?
Questions?
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely, yep.
So I've worked with the attorney who served that, and so we've got an extension to answer those until March 28th. And just for full transparency, I've been asked, kind of similar situation to this, to respond to discovery that was served on 3 other entities in that same action. And those are all 3 townships. One of them is Aberdeen Township, in Brown County, obviously. Diana Township, which I believe is up in Sanborn County, and then Trenton Township, and I'm not certain which county Trenton is actually in, but those are the 3. And so what I've done with those, in those situations, and what I would offer here, and I know this is on the agenda, I looked at the item at 200 an hour. Maybe I'm getting a little past your question, but it'll come full circle, I promise. What I did with them is said, they've retained me just to respond to the discovery. And so what I've done with them is just flat feed them $1,000 to respond to the discovery, which I anticipate will be, include objections and things like that from Summit, because there's going to be some of those questions where we're going to say we're not going to give you the answer. And if my experience in the past is anything like what I expect going forward, they're going to object to that, and there's going to be a discovery battle. And so a lot of those objections are going to be the same for, Brown County as it will be for Aberdeen Township, Diana Township. So kind of sharing that effort, I think, is good fiscal sense for everybody involved. If you go beyond just the discovery and you really want to intervene actually in the PUC lawsuit, where you have somebody there that's actually engaged in the PUC, that would be maybe where that 200 an hour would come in. I don't think those townships, they don't have the funds to fight that fight, and I think they're probably hoping someone like Brown or McPherson County will do. So at any rate, that's a long way of kind of saying where I think it's going. Could it get dismissed? My goal is, for at least the discovery phase, is we've got until that March 28th. I hope that Summit dismisses its petition or its application by March 28th. So what I would say as far as responding to discovery is we would want to start the process of preparing those responses with the intent of being ready to comply on March 28th, because we are required under law to comply with that subpoena. But certainly we wouldn't actually comply with it until basically the last day, in hopes that, that they'll, in my opinion, they should dismiss their application. I think that's the proper thing to do, and I'm optimistic that hopefully they will do that by March 28th. But if not, we'll have our initial responses, and then I'm guessing that'll trigger a set of objections from them, and then we'll kind of have to go forward down that path.
So, Mr. Moser, this is Chairman Opp. Until that point, are you going to be working with our zoning liaison, Mr. Newhart, with those questions, or gearing up to that point?
Yeah, whoever you folks designate to me as the appropriate person that I should be corresponding with, that's who I would intend to correspond with. My preference would be that there would be somebody that you guys would identify as kind of the point person, and then that person could, you know, air traffic control if I need to speak to anybody else.
Are you in agreement, Jeff?
I suppose if I have to, thanks a lot, guys. No, no problem.
Okay,
No problem.
we just figured
I
that
know
you,
it closest to it,
sure, okay.
I know it closest to it and have dealt with it from the beginning, so that's probably the best option.
Okay, as far as board members, what's your discussion on, $1,000 limit on the intern?
Well, I think they could go over that in a hurry and hourly rate.
5 hours.
It's not much.
Exactly, and you already, the individual on Mr. Swatch had 5 hours stuck into this.
That's what he said, yep. Yep. And he's gonna waive that.
So do we wanna include $1,000, limit on interrogatories, and then if we need additional help at $200 an hour in the motion?
I would think that would make sense.
Okay, Jeff, you okay with that?
Yep, I move to do just that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to hire Mr. Mosier, the firm at $1,000 for interrogatories, and then any additional resources would be at $200 an hour. Do we have a second?
Would
You go ahead.
like to ask about, what do you think about that at this point? Highlighted part specifically.
I think, probably address that at a different meeting.
Okay,
Yep. I think here, let's just get this issue done, and we definitely will be discussing that.
We have a motion on the floor by Jeff. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Mike. Any other discussion? Roll call vote. Newhart?
Yes.
Aye. Aye. Mike?
Aye.
Sid?
Aye.
Mark? Aye. Motion carried. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried.
Nick, I have one more question. It would be possible that Summit would still wanna get a permit for South Dakota, even though they can't use eminent domain. Am I correct in saying that?
You are.
So this might kind of be an ongoing thing here, regardless of how the House Bill 1052 came out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if they, for example, went out and got, consent, got people to sign up to build the thing, they would need to get an application.
So whether they keep pursuing this actual permit or back off and then would, they could go for another one later. How long are those permits good for? I know the PUC is supposed to have a decision in a year, so is it a year that they're good for and then they have to reapply?
Don't quote me on this, but I believe that's accurate, that's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Nick, is your firm in Yankton, South Dakota? Just to be a little familiar with you.
It is in Yankton, South
Okay.
Dakota.
And that's, Mr. Swatch was also in Yankton.
He is, yeah, I don't know how it came by coincidence that, a couple of people involved in this battle are both in Yankton County law offices. Yeah, he's just a couple blocks away from me, but, yeah, both in Yankton.
I'm sure you don't talk at all.
We do talk, it's funny, we're never on opposite sides. I don't think either of us practice a ton necessarily right here in Yankton, and when you don't do family law and you don't do criminal law, you don't get in the courtroom with the local lawyers nearly as much, so.
Well, we wanna welcome you on, and, we, hope that probably, they withdraw their application, and this is as far as it goes at this point.
Right.
Are there any questions or any concerns from the public today? I'll open it up just briefly.
Just have a question. Just curious, who, the salaries are paid, are they paid out of Austin's salary because he's no longer involved as per, you know, this?
Yeah, that is something we will definitely be discussing in future meetings for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cause it kind of alludes to that in this 716.2 as far as, how the salary is
Right.
paid when ordered by the court.
We're very aware of it.
Okay, good enough.
And then there was a question too, I believe, for the emails being released, all the emails on this. And, it's public information. Whoever wants them, as far as I'm concerned, is gonna get them. So that's where we're at with that.
Can I interject on that, just if I may, on the emails? And I agree as far as public information, I'm not dissuading that. My preference as the attorney would be at least my communication just goes to the designated person and how it needs to go. Now, if your constituents want access to those emails and you wanna give it to them, that's completely up to you, but I do want to at least advise you that as far as keeping any kind of attorney-client privilege, and maybe there is none here, but if those emails get out beyond the designated, you know, counsel and staff members, you would, you know, likely lose any attorney-client privilege. Again, maybe it doesn't apply here, I just wanted to make sure you know.
Okay. And what were you, Rick, what were you trying, or Nick, what were you trying to explain there, that something that we receive, you will be CC'd on it? And then from that point, you make that decision, whether it's public knowledge? Is that how?
No, I mean, the way I approach it, my only goal is that I preserve for you your attorney-client privilege. And the way that I do that is if there's any communication between me and, you know, obviously a public meeting like this is public, of course.
Correct.
But if there's any internal emails back and forth, with, you know, the designated person that you guys, you know, connect me with, in order for that to retain attorney-client privilege, that needs to stay between me and that person and, you know, the commission, essentially.
It's understood. I'm talking about more the emails that were sent to everybody. I believe the public should be able to see it.
Yep.
Sid, I have a quick question. When they talked about with that, is it Jordy, is that his name, and the conflict of interest that might possibly be between that, because you're on the landowners meeting, has the county, like the citizens of the county, made their voice heard as to where they stand on the pipeline? I mean, have we had a vote saying we don't want it? Because if we've had a vote saying we don't want it, then if you don't want it and we don't want it and Jordy doesn't want it, then we're all on the same side, right?
Paige, one thing you have to understand is whether we want it or not, I'm just gonna bring up the data center, same thing. Basically, they have laws to refer to, the ordinances, if they are within the ordinances, there's basically nothing we can do to shut them down.
Well, and I understand when we met down at the Capitol, they talked about we have the freedom to say no, not on our land, and somebody else has the freedom to say yes, I'm fine with that. And so I understand that. I'm not saying, you know.
Am I wrong by saying that?
I don't think so. For me, I can have an opinion all day long that I don't want the pipeline, and that's my opinion.
Yeah.
But really what we were fighting for is that we wrote the ordinance, that they follow the ordinance.
Yeah.
That's what it come down to, and that's really what Brian Jordy and Nick Moser would be, you know, what's what it comes down to ultimately.
Okay.
My
I
opinion-
agree
my
with that.
opinion-
No, I agree with that. I just
My
wasn't quite
opinion
sure
doesn't
what
matter, it's what the zoning ordinance says, and hopefully we can enforce it.
Right, and I'm sure they're.
Hey, Sid?
Yep. Yep, go
Can I
ahead.
inject here a little bit?
Sure.
Yep, go ahead.
As far as the county is concerned, we really aren't taking a stand on whether we wanna allow the pipeline or not. We're simply stating we want the pipeline company to follow our ordinance.
And like you had mentioned, Jeff, also, you've given every opportunity for a route. It's not that we're limiting you that, correct?
Right. There's ways they can get through our county. We are not shutting them out with our ordinances. They burned a lot of bridges, and that's their problem. But, you know, they kinda don't wanna do the work. They want us to let them through without them doing the work to the people in our county. And that's not right.
I think,
That's what the stand of the county is. We aren't shutting them out. And we aren't saying no. We're saying you need to follow our ordinance.
correct.
And that would be the same reference to the data center, and then we're working on that right now.
And probably the real unintended consequence of the whole thing with Summit coming in here and it's really hurt, as far as I'm concerned, the other utility companies big time, because, everybody is questioning everything now. And I don't ever remember it being like this, but even the wind towers, there's people saying, hell no, I'm not gonna resign. And I know it's they say it's because of this Summit and how they approached everyone. So they've hurt the utility companies to no end. My opinion again.
And that's unfortunate because, you know, the last meeting we had, I wasn't aware that the Leola district gets that much money, and Walker Township.
With the wind towers.
That's quite a chunk of change a year, so.
Yeah.
State your name.
Matt Dement,
Okay.
how does this affect as far as the ordinances and the setbacks that you guys are writing? Cause isn't Austin drafting those up?
Well, they're kinda set already. We're just hoping that if there's a permit given, that they follow, they're told to follow our ordinance.
Okay.
I think that's kinda done.
We're just trying to get through these interrogatories.
Yeah,
And
but as far as
After
him
that,
with his
that's a
conflict,
different case.
with him and his conflict of interest, is that gonna mess with our ordinances and?
Shouldn't.
No.
That's set,
No.
passed.
Steve,
And that ordinance is in place. The ordinance for the pipelines is in place.
Correct.
The ordinance for data centers is not completed yet. And that's why there's a moratorium on the data centers.
I'm just curious how long this specific ordinance has been in place. Has it been like years
I
or
think
months?
September of 24 or 23, no, of 23. The pipeline ordinance we got in 23 because it was right before the September 11th or the early September PUC meeting, am I right? I think it was the end of August we had it passed.
Would,
Go ahead,
I believe
Jeff.
that's right, Sid.
Yeah,
would Austin have had any conflict at that point, at that time? In the writing of this
I
ordinance?
don't believe he stated any at that time.
We weren't aware of it, and I guess it's probably,
At that, if I remember correctly, at that time, the route was different and didn't affect his father's land.
correct. Yes. State your name, sir. even though-
Gordon Zimmerman. Perhaps I'm just not informed about this and I need to be straightened out. You're talking about, Austin recusing himself completely? That's my question now. I mean, if I understand it right, didn't he have something to do with it since he recused himself? Or will he continue to be involved? I don't have anything, I just don't understand this whole thing. If you recuse yourself, I thought you were out.
We had,
Who am I, who's
Miss-
speaking?
Mr. Netherland is speaking.
Gordon Sutherland.
Okay, you know, he really is out on anything to do with Summit. However, he can still give me and the zoning board and the commission board advice on procedure. As far as if somebody applies for, if I've got a question of how we actually do the procedure of the permit, he can answer that. And if he doesn't feel comfortable answering that, he's not supposed to. But I see no reason why he can't answer questions on procedure.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah,
Yep,
thank you,
gotcha.
Jeff. We're gonna move on. Is there anything else from the board, commissioners? I do believe, Mike, which you had brought up, we probably have, executive session in April, as we planned, okay? All right, I would, ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
So moved, second,
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Aye,
Roll call vote, Jeff,
aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Sid,
Aye.
Mark, aye, all in favor say aye, all opposed, motion carried.
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.